Ready to go. If the board members, again, can make sure you have your microphones on, we'll start the committee of the whole. Again, the hour being 6:51 PM on Monday, June 10th, I'd like to call to order the Village of Brookfield Committee of the Whole meeting. Bridget, can we have a roll call for the committee meeting, please?
Trustee Ketchmark?
Here.
Trustee Cote?
Here.
Trustee Hendricks?
Here.
Trustee Miramatsu?
Here.
Trustee Gahuli?
Here.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Here.
President Garvey.
Here. Thank you, Bridget. The first item is a planning and zoning case, a discussion of case 2406, a request for zoning variances from section 62-75 bulk yard and space requirements and section 62-450 extensions, expansions, enlargements, intensity of non-conforming buildings and structures for 4172 Blanchard Avenue. In our packets, we have the staff memo and Planning and Zoning Commission information, but I'm going to ask our village planner, Kate Portillo, to provide a summary to the board, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Kate?
Thank you, President Garvey and trustees. As you mentioned, this is a case for 4172 Blanchard. The applicant has made this application in order to, or with the hope of constructing a second floor addition. You may have noted that the original packet also included relief from the location of the deck, but that is in fact exempt according to our code, so that's no longer a part of the request. The Jacobo has lived in his home since 2009, and he's actually lived in the community since 2003. He attested to his interest in staying in the community and investing in the community at the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. This is a parcel located in a single-family residential district, and the home was built in 1927 with north side yard setbacks, plus or minus 1 foot, where normally we'd be talking about a 5-foot setback for all residential districts. So the application was made based on the space limitations that would result in building the second floor addition scrunched in, so to speak, to meet those 5-foot setbacks. The desire of Juan and his family was to seek potential zoning relief. So the second floor addition, based on the existing design of the existing home, would in fact have a drip line that encroaches on the neighboring property. In the application packet, Mr. Jacobo did in fact provide a letter of support from the neighboring property that you see in this picture, and the Planning and Zoning Commission heard this case on May 23rd. So the request came forward, and as I just said, this is a request for relief from that 5-foot setback in order to build the second floor addition straight up. In their deliberations, the commissioners did note that the gutter design of that second floor addition is now in fact tighter to the building and did slightly lessen that non-conforming condition. So the Planning and Zoning Commission issued a unanimous favorable recommendation for approval by a vote of 5 ayes and 0 nays.
Thank you, Kate. Sorry, thank you. Trustee Hendricks, was there anything you wanted to add?
Kate covered it all.
Thank you. Do any board members have any questions or comments about the case or the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission? Okay, hearing none, the board can contemplate this, and we'll put it up for the June 24th Village Board meeting for a board vote. Thank you very much, Kate. Okay, the next item is we have a presentation for the Ogden Avenue corridor improvements. Just by way of some background, in 2020, the village applied for and was awarded funding from the Central Council of Mayors for Surface Transportation Program funds to prepare a Phase 1 developmental report, a PDR, for the Ogden Avenue corridor improvements. We went through the process with Kimberly Horn as a consultant for the Ogden Corridor Plan, and the village adopted the Energize Ogden Plan in 2022. And then the village was awarded funding through the federal fiscal year 2023, and we entered into an agreement with Civil Tech Engineering to prepare the PDR. And Civil Tech is here tonight to make a presentation to the board. So welcome. If we could have your name, please.
Sure, thank you very much. My name is Jim Tibble. Again, I'm with Civil Tech Engineering.
Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Floor is yours.
All right. Well, you stole my introduction. This project did stem from the Energize Ogden project, and we are looking at the public infrastructure to resurface Ogden Avenue, improve the ADA and sidewalks out there, looking at streetscape elements as well, traffic signal modernization, incorporating the active transportation plan, and replacing the aging utilities. The environmental and design study, or a Phase 1 study, looks at crash, safety, traffic, geometric studies, environmental impacts, as well as coordination with IDOT and other agencies. We anticipate this process to take about 15 to 18 months from where we are right now. Following that, we'll head into Phase 2, the contract plan preparation. The STP funding for that is scheduled for 2027. And in best case scenario, construction would begin in 2029. And I believe the village has not identified funding for that yet, but they will be applying for funding applications as the project progresses. So I'm here tonight to discuss just a couple of potential design elements and get some input. The first of which is parking on side streets, turning movements at signals, left turn lanes, and then pedestrian crossings. So when we look at the side street parking along Ogden, this is between Ogden Avenue and the very first alley. We did a parking study to look at the number of utilized spaces out there, as well as we got a lot of input at the public information meeting and public comments stating that there's not enough parking. And our parking counts did show that a lot of people are parking out there, and as well as there's not enough parking out there. One of the challenges when we're looking at some of these narrow corridors is the type of parking spaces to implement. Angled parking versus parallel. With angled parking, you're going to have more parking spaces, but you're reducing any green space or landscaping, streetscaping elements. With parallel, you're going to have more of that green space, but also you're reducing the number of parking spaces you can have. Another challenge we have is the design standards that Brookfield has been using along some of these side streets with some of the newly constructed parking spaces. If we were to follow that, we'd have to seek a design variance from IDOT. Really, the biggest difference is the offset from the crosswalk. IDOT's going to require us to proceed and get 30 feet. The Brookfield standard's 20 feet. So we're maybe losing about a space or so if we were to stick to the IDOT standard. Since this project is going through IDOT and the federal aid process, we are going to need to get state approval on this project. And they do accept design exceptions, design variances, given there's enough justification for why we are not meeting their criteria. So our recommendation for parking improvements is to maximize the parking on the side streets. Provide angled parking where it's appropriate, and then use parallel parking as a secondary option. At the roadways that have signalized intersections along Ogden, we do not want to provide angled parking. You get some higher speeds as cars are approaching Ogden to try to catch a green, and that could cause a safety conflict with the backing up vehicle. We would recommend evaluating the parallel parking or maintaining the existing configuration that's out there. We also recommend approaching IDOT, including all of the parking improvements in the federal aid study. That way, they can be applied, when we apply for funding for construction, they can be included in the 75% or so of funding, federal funding for the project. Do you have any questions or thoughts on the parking?
Yeah, maybe we should go through these one by one, all the different elements, before we move on to
Sure.
board member, before, moving on to the turning movements and signals. So how does the board feel about the recommendations related to the parking?
I'm in favor of the angle park. I like the recommendation. It goes along with when they held it at the library. That was one of the things that I talked to somebody about. And I'm totally in favor of what they're offering there.
Yeah, makes sense to me as well.
So you said the 20 to 30-foot difference between Brookfield Design Standards and IDA, is that, so that's coming from the actual Ogden Avenue to the first spot?
Yeah, that's from the crosswalk,
Okay,
the edge of the crosswalk to the tip of the spot, yes.
okay. I'm just curious, because I think you just mentioned it, but, you know, when I'm turning, I live off on Raymond in that first block, and when you're trying to turn onto one of the side streets there, and someone's trying to back up, it can get a little bit backed up depending on the time of day. So I'm not sure if, you know, the 30 feet would be helpful to kind of reduce that. I don't know if that's something you saw in your study or not, if there was backup along Ogden.
I don't believe so. We did our study, we flew a drone every hour to kind of count the number of spaces that were used. So we do have the drone video, so we could go back and look at that, see if.
Yeah, I'm just, maybe it's not as, I mean, it's not a huge problem. I'm just wondering if that's something that would alleviate that problem of having the 30 feet instead of the 20 feet.
Sure.
I mean, that's come up in other areas too. When we were talking about the potential daycare center off 31st and Park, as you turn off 31st onto Park, there's parking right up to, you
Right.
know, the turn, and that is a dangerous situation. I mean, it seems like the recommendation to go with the angled parking, you know, is to maximize parking, and obviously this goes to that also in terms of the shorter, if there's a shorter distance, it would take away some parking, but I don't know if there's a balancing act there. I understand your point. I kind of question it also. I mean, as you turn, when people turn off Ogden Avenue on some of the side streets, oftentimes they're, you know, some people are, it's the residents going to their residents, and sometimes it's people trying to cut through and avoid a light, and they're turning very quickly, so it's just a balancing act. Is the rest of the board have ideas or concerns about the 20 feet versus 30 feet off the intersection?
I'm curious if you had a recommendation either way.
Yeah.
Based on the public input, I think it would be beneficial to have the additional parking space and kind of maximize it and go to the 20 feet.
Well, that's interesting. Because my inclination would be the other way, to give that extra space. I know that we have big concerns about Ogden being not pedestrian friendly, and my assumption would be that increasing that distance would make that situation better.
Yeah, and we are taking additional steps to try to make it more pedestrian friendly, widening the sidewalks where we can, obviously improving the ADA ramps at each intersection, identifying improvements with bump outs on some of those side streets as well.
Jim, can you talk about, is any accident history with that's the current layout when those side streets were improved, where we're not using the federal funding? And again, it's a limited corridor. You actually would need a wider corridor to meet even Brookfield parking standards. So we sort of optimized what we could during our street improvement projects. But any comments on accident history as far as when they're backing out and coming across the crosswalk?
Yeah,
there?
the crash volume has been very low with parking vehicles.
I wonder if that's partly because pedestrians don't like to be in those spaces.
Well, it seems, I mean, you know, there's so I guess what I'm trying to, so I can help with the board here, are we looking for specific decisions or direction on, you know, for instance, angled versus parallel, when we go with the 20 feet versus 30 feet? I mean, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, our next step is to approach IDOT to officially kick off the meeting, and we want to present our concept to them. and let them know off the bat that we're going to have some design exceptions, and to get their input on that as well.
Okay. So just so I mean, does everyone agree, so I can give proper direction to staff and Civil Tech, does everyone agree with the angled versus the parallel?
I do.
Yes,
Yes.
Okay. Now, this issue of the 20-foot versus the 30-foot, I mean, is staff, village staff, and Derek, do you have a recommendation beyond Civil Tech, or?
Do, again, I'm gonna recommend what we've been building all these years is maximizing the parking. You could eliminate a couple of those spots roughly. It might be helpful if we, after the meeting, come back with a exhibit just showing what the turning movement looks like. Like on a turning program, we can show if it encroaches on the crosswalk. Again, as Jim said, what we're looking to do is go to IDOT and either request or not request the variance. We can request the variance, and then if the village board, when we come back, decides that they'd rather lose the spots and go to that 30-foot offset, then we,
IDOT won't have a problem if they've granted us the variance, so.
then it wouldn't be.
That might, I mean, does the board agree with that strategy that, you know, we can go ask for it for IDOT, we gotta get permission, and then we could decide after that going forward with some more information and some visual assistance?
I think that makes sense to have that option, to go for the variance, and you can always not do it, but you can't go back and ask for it later.
We could also treat it as individual intersections. So if we'll look at the accident history at each intersection, we'll look at the parking utilization. Maybe we have lower parking utilization and we want to go for the 30 feet at some intersections. This is all part of that master plan. I don't know that the parking now, I think we all agree we want more parking. I mean, that's one of the primary drivers of this project, so.
It has been, I think, from the board and from the public comment, but I think, I mean, I understand some of the board members' perspective about balancing with safety, but I think by doing it this way, approaching IDOT about the possibility of the variations and then leaving open options, we could do it on a case-by-case, block-by-block basis. If we got general approval, we can go through and look at individual intersections and get more, look at the actual data and other things to decide, because, you know, it's gonna, you know, I'm of the mind that, you know, every parking space we add is gonna be beneficial incrementally. We're, you know, the amount of parking spaces we're adding isn't that large or, but everyone could make a difference in terms of the future development, the future plans that we have for Ogden. So we gotta try and find it where we can, balancing it with the safety. So is the board okay with that direction?
I am.
Yeah, that's fine. My inclination is a little bit with trustee Hendricks. I would like to see the visuals, because I know exactly the example you're talking about is you're going to make a turn and people are flying behind you, but then there's somebody backing up as you're trying to make that. There's really nowhere else to go, and it can be very dangerous.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, where we need the most parking, at least in my experience, I don't know further east you go, but around the Raymond area is Galloping Ghost, right? And the one spot isn't gonna help that particular problem. So, I don't know, I like this approach though, for sure.
So is there any further direction you need on the side street parking issue?
I don't believe so.
Okay, so do you want to now talk about the turning movements at the signals?
Yes.
Thank you.
So each roadway, it has a functional class, which is basically a hierarchy, going from interstates all the way down to local routes. Ogden is classified as a principal arterial, which means it's really focusing on regional travel. A lot of the streets coming up to Ogden, most of them are local streets or collectors. And as you're going from a smaller street to a larger street, the size of truck or car that you're designing for varies. With some of the smaller local streets, it's a school bus. Some of the larger arterials, it's semis, and depending on the length of the semi as well, on where you are on that list. Again, this is another topic that IDOT will entertain a design variance for, and it's likely that we will have to approach them for some design variances. Also, some other things we want to consider with our truck turning movements and everything else is the active transportation plan. I know that there's a mention of bump outs and curb extensions at Maple and Ogden. That really isn't feasible with the current configuration of the road. However, there are bike routes along Du Bois, Maple, and Prairie, and we are going to look to incorporate those into our improvements as we continue on. So each of these next slides, they're kind of all telling the same story. We've outlined the turning movements of where the trucks would be to meet the IDOT criteria. And essentially, the blue and purple is how much widening would need to be done to meet the IDOT criteria. And on each of these corners, it's quite a bit of a widening to accommodate all these vehicles. And even on some intersections, that widening would go into some existing buildings. So I don't think I need to go through each of these one by one, but the information's here. If we have any questions, I can flip to it.
A general question on
Yes.
many of these, the commercial signage is in the way. I mean, I'm not sure what jurisdiction we have on some of these. I think a couple of these are in other municipalities. I mean, one of these corners is in LaGrange, I think one is in Lyons. How does that all work with this?
So we will be coordinating with both those municipalities as we continue on this project. With the federal aid projects, you need to have logical termini, and that's pretty much, with this project, we've identified it as the village limits. Those are collector roadways on each end, so that makes sense for a logical termini. However, we do have to study the intersections themselves. So we can't just go up to the very limit and then just forget about the rest of it.
But, so what happens, like on East Avenue in Ogden, I think we're encroaching into where the Village of LaGrange sign is.
Yes.
So when it comes to something like that, can they say no? Is it up to us to pay to move it, or?
Well, the signage is on private property, so that would require some right-of-way acquisition for any of that pavement widening.
So same as like, I think right across the street from that, you have the sign for the car wash.
Mm-hmm.
So that'd be the same, I mean, we can't take it per se.
Right, yes. So I was getting to that. Our recommendation is to really approach these turning movements as a case-by-case scenario and really customize it. One, looking at the volume of trucks that are turning and the types of vehicles that are using it, as well as the available space out there, and really try to maximize it without having major impacts.
So what would the customization process look like? What customization could you do or would you seek? I mean, you'd need approval for this, right, from IDA?
Yes, yeah, this is gonna require design variances from IDOT. And essentially, it's looking at like maybe having a school bus be our design vehicle. And then, kind of like making sure that it's not getting worse than what's out there today. And some of these streets, a school bus can make these turns without encroaching on oncoming traffic.
You said they can, correct?
They can, yes.
Okay.
So if there's little widening that could be done, that can make a big difference on going from one vehicle to another. If a lot of trucks are making that turn, that's something we would want to evaluate.
Okay.
If I could offer a little, so Kit, to address your question, so these projects, Lyons at Custer Avenue and LaGrange at Everly Avenue, will have to sign off on these improvements also. Okay, so if we're negotiating to try and obtain right-of-way in LaGrange or private property in LaGrange to increase the right-of-way, they're gonna have to approve that. They do have the ability to review and approve these plans. Is that what you were asking?
Right, and I guess at what point do they become involved? I mean, I'm not sure the traffic you have on Custer and Ogden, but certainly on East Everly and Ogden, the truck turning, I mean, there's a lot of trucks.
And East Avenue is a county route.
It is.
So the
Yeah,
county
it's
will
to
be
the
involved
south.
as well with this project. We'll have to get their approval on our design.
And at what point, so we're coming to, Brookfield is the lead agency first to obtain your input, and then we'll have meetings with LaGrange after that. Same with Lyons. Custer, because of the low volume and we don't have large trucks, we were not anticipating the need to go ahead and obtain right-of-way there. But what we really wanted to do is come here and show you that if we were going to meet IDOT standards, then there's a lot of property acquisition, there's buildings that would need to be taken down at certain intersections. It wasn't our thought wasn't that that's what the village wanted to do, so we would improve to the maximum extent possible, either within the right-of-way, or there may be some intersections where we can obtain a little right-of-way that has little or no impact. And we're just trying to get a feel in this first meeting, does the board agree with that approach? And then we can come back with more detailed plans for each intersection. I didn't, for instance, do you have any of these where we were gonna encroach on a building?
Yes. Like
The-
at Custer.
Yeah, Custer. My opinion, we don't have the traffic demand, we don't have the cars turning over the, back a curb and the sidewalks at Custer to warrant putting in these wider radiuses to meet IDOT standards. So my thought is we would widen it to maximum extent possible without impacting the existing buildings. And we're looking for, board concurrence or discussion on that point.
It
Do
just
you
seems
wanna
like
g-
that Everly and Ogden is probably the most challenging because of the traffic you have there. I mean, trucks cannot make that turn. I mean, the stopping line in the left turn lane is, what, 20 feet back? Not everyone stops there. The truck can't even, turn into there then.
Right.
But to make it the width you would need, I mean, you've got the signage for the car wash, you've got, a lot of other things in the way there. But that would seem to be the most challenging one.
Agreed. And I anticipate meeting next with Brookfield staff and LaGrange staff in the same room and coming up with what sort of impacts the private property are both villages willing to tolerate to improve that intersection. That'll be the next step on that. So this is more, again, this is an initial discussion, general approach, showing you that there's pretty significant impacts to try to meet the IDOT requirements. I guess to explain it too, is we have a 66-foot right-of-way, which is the same as all those north-south side streets. It's a very narrow right-of-way for a arterial like Ogden. We all know that. That's why we have very little parkway. We only have 10-foot lanes. The IDOT requirement is 12-foot lanes. There's a lot squeezed into that right-of-way. So we're trying to improve the intersections as much as we can without adversely impacting those private properties on the corner.
Trustee Kaluzny, you had something?
Well, so this is what IDOT requirement is, and so you're looking for a variance to reduce it in this
Yes.
case,
Yeah.
based on our,
Is the purple the sidewalk? Is that the back
Yes,
of the sidewalk?
Yeah, the dark purple would be, the minimum sidewalk width at those corners.
And the light blue is the back of curb, right? The widening up to
Yes.
the
Yeah,
new
the
back
widening.
of curb. So it shows you the property impact, and is that a 7-foot sidewalk through there, not a
Ye-
10-foot,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So 7 foot's the minimum sidewalk we can put in. Right now, there's about a 10-foot parkway. So just to accommodate the minimum 7-foot wide sidewalk, you can see the impacts that we'd be looking at Custer here.
So, I mean, Derek did a good job of summarizing. I mean, theoretically, the board's two options are, we could say we want to try and meet IDOT standards, which would mean we would have to attempt to acquire all this right away and make it that route. Or the other option is to try and minimize the impact the best we can and make customized decisions at each intersection. And I think the board, Trustee Ketchmark was correct. I think East Avenue and Eberly is the most prominent problem. I agree Custer is less of an issue, but again, it's approaching IDOT and trying to come up with the most customized plan to work with what we've got without major impact or major land acquisition. That it's not just a land acquisition, it's changing these businesses and some buildings and things like that, so.
could you go to the Prairie one, because that one seemed the most
Yes,
unique?
the Prairie one is very unique because of the way the intersection's laid out. It's a split phase, so the northbound and southbound have separate green times. So that's why the turning movement kind of loops into the other direction, because they have the green time to themselves, they have more space of the,
So you're not recommending reconfiguring that intersection, but this is just showing the turning rate? Okay.
yes. Yes, I believe early on, it was thought to maybe look into it, but since then, I believe a business is going in on that corner.
So is there a consensus to go with the recommendation for kind of customizing the movement at each intersection, seeking some design exceptions and avoiding some major impacts or land acquisition issues?
I'm in favor of that.
Okay, I mean, there seems to be a clear
Yeah.
consensus from the board on that.
Though I think if we can improve some of these spaces by just maybe shifting over somebody's sign, we should at least look into that.
I think, that's what I was taking from staff, that if possible, there'd be recommendations for customized solutions
Yes, I
individually.
will come back with customized solutions. Can we go to Everly too? That is by far the most challenging. That may, so this is the existing curb here, correct, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. To get the new curb in to meet IDOT standards, you're coming back to here, it's, I know this is light, but this is the right of way, so I don't have the dimensions, 10 by 10, 15 by 15, but then to maintain the sidewalk, this is just a line 7 foot back of this, proposed curb. You can see we have a pretty significant piece of property that we're impacting. I will tell you, I think the approach with LaGrange is, maybe that's what you want to do on this intersection. We've had the traffic signal knocked down, there's a lot of issues there. So I think this is one you would consider meeting the IDOT requirements. You can see here, I think we're all familiar with the car wash property, we have the signage on the corner. That corner, the back of the sidewalk's right up about here. You can see how far we impact that. We'll meet. We'll start out probably with something like this, and then we'll look at operationally, is there something, if we push this 5 feet further and don't get the full widening, but can we lessen their impact where it's significantly lets, because I think this might impact operations on their, you know, as they exit out here and try to come, I think they come through here, but we'll meet individually with these properties. We're just looking for like a general approach. Is the board said, no, we want to meet the IDOT requirements on all intersections. That gives us a little different approach with the business owners.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's what we're hearing from the board, but we do look at some even incremental improvements or changes that could make, make some improvements without the major land acquisition type thing, so.
And that's the guidance we're looking, I know it's a small step, but that's the guidance we're
Sure.
looking for tonight.
From a design point of view, do you look at the north and south sides separately? Because I travel through here nonstop every day. So the traffic from Ogden onto Everly or from Everly onto Ogden is pretty key, whereas on the other side, on the north side, when you're turning into the body shop or, 7-Eleven, you're not seeing the big truck traffic
Correct.
going into
Yeah,
there.
so we would customize each corner, each turning movement individually. So it could be school buses on the north leg, semis on the south leg.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Justin.
Just a quick question. The, on the turn radiuses, we're talking buses, semis, et cetera, but from a safety point of view, we were just talking about safety on other aspects. If by pulling back the sidewalk and, because bump outs are meant to be safer for pedestrians, et cetera, by pulling that back, is there a history of increased speed from regular vehicles trying to make those turns? Is
History
that
of
a danger issue? Or?
It depends on the crosswalk location, definitely. And with our improvements, we would be looking at where the crosswalk is, making sure it's not too far set back, so the cars aren't making that turn or starting to accelerate as they approach the crosswalk. That's definitely one of our considerations.
Okay, thank you.
In this section, you had some comments here about some bike accommodations. Did you want to address that?
Yeah, just very briefly, with some of these bike accommodations, it may require widening or narrowing a lane, a foot or two, to meet the standards for bike lanes or a shared lane. And I think that's something we would recommend incorporating, because it's identified in the active transportation plan. We'd want to incorporate those as necessary or as appropriate.
Obviously, I mean, this board is supported in, making bike routes and bike accommodations. We encourage it. We have a very active Cyclebrook field group, and anything we could do to accommodate and make it safer for cycling would be, again, with the understanding of what is possible with the, we are stuck with the design of Ogden Avenue and the narrower routes that we have, but I'm glad that you brought that up and mentioned that. I'm sure that came in quite a bit with the public comment.
Yeah, definitely. And we've been coordinating with Cyclebrook Field as well.
And if you could just, not to get off that, could you just talk about how important the public comment was during this portion of it? I mean, we put these things out, your experience in this field, but we encourage public comment. Can you just talk a little bit about how important the public comment is to encourage people to show up for this?
Yeah, definitely. So the way we tailored this project was our first public information meeting. It was really just a fact finding. We just presented the existing conditions, invited the public out, And we really just wanted to hear what they thought the problems were with the corridor. So that helped us establish a need for the project. In addition to that, we did a walk shop where we, went out there on foot, stopped in at business owners, talked to them one-on-one, just to kind of introduce them to the project, tell them, we are making progress along Ogden, what are your concerns and everything else.
Thanks. Because, obviously, we have board members that are familiar with this area and live and work and drive through there all day, but, I mean, it's just, we always try to encourage the residents that their public comment does mean something, so.
Yeah, and for the public meeting, we invited over 500 residents. I don't know if you remember, Emma, the number we had, but. The residents for what was the number? 60 to 70 residents sign in at the meeting, but the invites, do you remember how many we sent out? 1,200
Okay.
mailings. So we are, doing our effort. It was posted on the village website as well. So we strongly encourage the public involvement.
Thank
Can
you.
I ask a quick, what are bike boxes?
Bike boxes, those are with bike lanes. They are about a 5-10 foot space in front of the stop bar for bikes to come up and go in front of the traffic at the lights.
Okay. I think I saw some last weekend, so I was just making sure I was visualizing it correctly. Thank you.
You want to talk about potential left turn lanes?
Yes. Okay. So the two of the signalized intersections out there, Du Bois and Custer, they do not have left turn lanes along Ogden Avenue. The other 3 signals do. And we wanted to look at the potential of widening Ogden Avenue to add in these left turn lanes. Again, IDOT has certain criteria for left turn lanes. Those are 75 left turns per hour. Operational deficiencies or a lot of delays for left turning vehicles, and high crash rates. First, I'm going to talk about Du Bois, and at that intersection, there's only a maximum of 15 left turns during the peak hour, or the heavily most traveled hour during the day, and that is well less than 75. Our operational analysis, looking at levels of service and delay through the intersection, results in really no operational benefit. If the car's not there when the arrow turns green, he's pretty much waiting through the cycle for it to turn yellow and clear out so he can turn. Crashes are also very low at this intersection. We had, over the 5-year period, only 3 crashes, 1 left turn, and 2 side swipes, which have been understood to be cars getting out of the left lane into the right lane and hitting a car. And no injury for any of those crashes as well. Adding left turn lanes would also require restriping Du Bois, which could potentially remove parking. And then widening along Ogden reduces the sidewalks up to the building face to about 5 feet, which just really isn't acceptable. So our recommendation at Du Bois really is to kind of maintain the existing lane configuration.
Does the board have questions or comments regarding that recommendation? I mean, that seems pretty straightforward. I mean, the 15 turns per hour is a max. It's nowhere near the typical requirement. And, reducing the sidewalk, to that length. I mean, we talk about making it more pedestrian friendly and making a 5-foot sidewalk along Ogden Avenue just doesn't make sense. So, I mean, I think this was due diligence in terms of looking at the options, but I mean, is there a clear consensus from the board that we would maintain the existing lane configuration?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
And then looking next at Custer, pretty similar situation. The turning volume is a little bit higher at 55. However, that is still less than the 75 vehicles per hour. Again, no operational benefit. Here, there's only 2 crashes, 1 left turn and 1 side swipe. Again, no injury crashes. Again, removal of parking, and then the widening along Ogden would bring that sidewalk down to 7 feet, which is acceptable. However, that's not very pedestrian friendly.
Does the board agree with I mean, it's the cost-benefit analysis here that, I mean, the 7-foot sidewalk is a little better and more acceptable, but the other, removing parking and the benefit of doing it we agree with the recommendation at Custer to maintain the existing lane configuration?
Yes.
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 Before we move on to that, in terms of the left turn, are we considering any changes to westbound traffic at Ogden and Prairie? We really don't have a left turn lane there. We kind of have it striped and people kind of will
Yes.
pull out into that island.
Yes, our recommendation there was to sign that prohibit the left turn. Sign it, no left turn. Right now, it's just kind of like you said, it's striped, so but there's nothing prohibiting you from making that turn. When really the eastbound has the left turn lane and there's that conflict zone that you can
Right.
get into. So we would recommend signing that no left turn.
So no other options we're looking at there. I mean, doing a no left turn there, I mean, that intersection has substantial traffic.
It does, yes. That left turn volume was very low during our counts, so it would be impacting a very low number of vehicles.
And is that something we can do on our own without IDOT variation or anything like that? or-
Outside of this project,
Yes.
I believe so. You would probably have to go through the permits at IDOT,
It's an IDOT route.
since it is their route.
So you understand it, that, can we pull up Prairie?
Yeah.
So it's the offset intersection is to make these left turns, you can't have this car making a left turn and this car making a left turn because they conflict with each other. So typically a left turn would not be allowed there the drivers, if you have, cars going east and westbound on Ogden, both trying to make a left
Yeah.
turn, they really don't, someone has to give, that's not, it's a dangerous move, it really should be prohibited now, and, again, I think that's the safest solution. It's just, and it's all based on this offset intersection, which is
Yep.
unusual for collector routes.
But is that part of the decision we make here? Is that's a separate step that we need to take? Or is it part of this?
That would be part of the decision as part of this
Okay.
project.
How does the board agree with the no left turn concept there?
Yep.
I'm not sure what your other options are. I mean, I think, I think there's driver etiquette that you go through at that intersection.
Yeah,
as to how far you
the other
pull up.
option would be to look at widening to the east to add a westbound left turn lane, and then changing the cycles to have a protected only left turn, which would increase the delay at that intersection quite a bit.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think we can count on etiquette. I think we have to make it clear with signage and regulations, so.
Right.
Is there consensus on the board about that?
Yep.
Okay. All right, I think there's a clear enough consensus from the board, so. Okay, you want to talk about pedestrian crossings next?
Yeah, pedestrian crossings. So as we start to look and make this corridor more pedestrian friendly, we're looking at the pedestrian safety and crossings that are out there. Currently, there's crossings, or there will be crossings at all 5 of the signalized intersections. And at Raymond, there is an existing uncontrolled crossing. So it's just a painted crosswalk out there now. And I believe there's one sign for the school crossing. Between Maple and Prairie is almost a 2,000-foot stretch of no crosswalks or anything out there. So we want to look at both Raymond and Oak Avenue as locations to improve crossing, and add one at Oak. We kind of have two options to look at as we get into these. The first one would be widen the roadway to provide a pedestrian refuge, or a space in the median for the pedestrians to stop so they can only cross the traffic one direction at a time. Or to improve the crossing without widening the pavement and just adding in adequate signage, rapid rectangular flashing beacons, and everything else that would make it more friendly. So I'm going to start with, yes. Again, I want to mention that, this is, again, the ultimate decision is going to be up to IDOT. So we can approach them with this great design, say we support this, and they could always come back and say it doesn't meet whatever, you're crossing 30,000 vehicles per day, they may request it to be taken out. But having the board support on any improvement can also sway their thoughts on the design as well.
Is there an example, I'm trying to think of an example of pedestrian refuge island somewhere on
Yes.
Ogden Avenue with the similar width that we have? Is there anywhere you can point us, or?
Not on Ogden, no.
Okay.
If up on 31st Street, just west of Brookfield, at the Salt Creek Trail, there is a crossing with a median island, pedestrian median island, and I think that one's about 12 feet wide.
Okay.
And it has the rapid rectangular flashing beacons as well.
So the thought is to consider asking IDOT for permission to put a pedestrian refuge island on Ogden with the width we have. I mean, but that doesn't seem very likely that would be approved, does it?
Well, IDOT has a set of guidelines for these uncontrolled crossings.
Okay.
And, you know, the amount of volume, it requires a site-specific design, which really means like there's a lot of traffic out there, there's nothing standard that can be implemented. So we have a rendering on one of these slides here that shows what our proposal would be. It would have these overhead mast arms with the signage and the flashing beacons overhead, as well as having one in the median and one on the side. So it's an attempt to try to improve this intersection to make it as best as it can for a pedestrian without actually implementing a signal.
So there wouldn't be a possibility of having, I've seen them where you can push a button and it would activate lights? Is that?
That's what these would be, yes.
Oh, okay, so just not a real signal, you mean?
Not
Okay,
a red,
traffic
yellow,
signal.
green
Okay, sorry.
signal. It would be the flashing.
Right, okay.
But you mentioned it's an attempt to make it safer. You see the one that you're talking about on 31st there, it almost seems like it makes it more dangerous for everyone. I mean, the cars are, I think speed limit's 40 miles an hour there, and all of a sudden the light's flashing, and a pedestrian figures, I'm safe, I can walk across. I mean, the car has to see them and stop, and, I mean,
Yeah, you know, that is a different scenario because that is kind of more of an open roadway, more, you're going adjacent to the forest preserve. There's not, you're not really expecting pedestrians out there. Here and in the more urbanized area, you know, pedestrians could be more prevalent and driver expectancy could be a little bit different here.
Is this the kind though, and I'm trying to remember the intersection, if it's first it flashes yellow and then goes to red? That particular one?
That's a hawk signal.
Hawk signal,
Yes,
okay.
and that would not be, I believe those have to be a certain distance from an intersection.
like by Grove School, not that.
No, not that one, but the one on 31st. by
On
the
31st, I
Forest
believe it's a RRFB, where you push the button and then it's white and yellow flashing. that
It
kind of-
just stays that, it
Yes.
doesn't go to red, okay, yeah.
So some more data. We need to look at these, each one individually. The one at Oak that's up here now, one thing we're doing is between DuBois, which is signalized to the west, and Maple, signalized to the east, we have somewhere around 1,500 feet. I don't know.
Yeah, it was about 2,000 from Maple to Prairie,
From Maple to Prairie, and this is
for Oak, yes.
for Oak, you're
Oak,
right.
Oak is in the center of that,
And
so it's
this is
about,
not the school crosswalk, correct?
No, that's Raymond.
Raymond's the school one.
Yeah.
So what, do we have pedestrian counts now? I know we don't have a crossing there, but
The counts were very low, mostly because, you know, we suspect it's just not safe to cross there.
so the other aspects of this design is obviously, again, it's a very narrow right of way. By adding in this total width here for the pedestrian, we have to take some property.
If I could just ask the audience, we can kind of hear the chat. Steve? I'm sorry, because we could hear the chatter up here. Well, there'll be a chance for public comment, but if, I know you're trying to help, but it's hard to hear.
Thank you, and so this is the new right-of-way, you can see it's fairly close to the, circular drive, is it the bank here?
The bank,
Am I
yeah.
wrong? Yeah, so there is some property acquisition to be, factored in. And the other, element that staff didn't really love is right now, we have that approximately a 10-foot parkway. It's not a 10-foot sidewalk, but when you're walking on the walk, you could be up to 10 foot away from the cars. This is proposing just a 7-foot walk, so the traffic's gonna feel like
Closer.
it's on top of you a little more than it currently does. So it's kind of you're weighing the benefits of having this refuge island to, we're shifting through this intersection. Again, looks like is this the back of walk?
Yes.
Yeah, so you can see the existing right-of-way up here. This is the new back of walk. Looks like very little impact on the north, right?
Yeah, at this location, we purposefully widened only to the south to kind of use the available space that was in front of the bank.
Does the research show that when you put those refuge islands in, do cars typically slow down when they see those?
It does raise driver awareness, yeah.
It does.
So the one on 31st that you're talking about is over there by the Forest Preserve that crosses right before you get to Westchester. And I run across that all the time, and you hit that button, and you know what? The majority of people do slow down and stop, and they're pretty good about it with all the flashing and everything. So that's pretty, every now and then you get one that goes through, but it's usually the one in the farthest lane. He's like, he's not making it across yet, and he takes off. But I always felt that it was fairly safe, but as a pedestrian or whatever, when you're crossing that section, you just pause for a quick second, and then you're usually pretty good. But I personally like those, because then I have been caught on the island in the middle, and usually somebody will stop and let you go across still, but I personally like it. I would love to have that as an addition.
Yeah, and with or without the island, we would be approaching IDOT with installing the RFB at these locations. That would be our recommendation.
Okay, so do you want to talk about each one of these, the Ogden one and the Raymond one separate, or the Oak one and the Raymond one separately in terms of, board, have questions? And I should have done this earlier. We do have general public comment, but I value the opinions of people in the audience. If the board has any questions or comments right now, we're good. If there's anyone in the audience that wants to comment on this particular thing before the board gives direction, I'll give that opportunity. So is there anyone that has, whether it's staff or resident, that would like to, or fire chief? Chief Adams, if you could come up to the microphone, just so maybe I'll pick it up better. And I'm sorry, I should have done this earlier on some of the other issues, but.
I happen to know that fire chief very intimately when that intersection was put in, that safety crossing by the, that first year, it seemed like we had more accidents, but after that, it seemed way safer than it ever did. It just was that learning curve that the public needed to have. But like Trustee Cote said, it's, and I drive that way every day,
Yeah.
to and from work and everything. So at first I had my doubts, but now that I've seen it and people have learned from it, it's actually seems like a really good alternative to actually have there. So.
And I was going to raise that point about the learning curve, and just in general, we teach our kids and everyone else not to just assume that a stop sign, the cars are going to stop. There has to be some awareness. So I do think it's a potential option. But thank you, Chief. Anyone else? Steve, would you like to? Thank you. And again, if you just state your name, we all know who you are. But
Steve Saburn. There was a crossing that was recently put in and then quickly taken out that was on Ogden Avenue in Western Springs area between Wolf Road and 294 at the entrance to Bemis Woods South. And I'm just wondering what led to the quick installation and then quick takedown of that lighting, and if there was a reason, was it a traffic, safety reason? Is it because of the slowing of the traffic in that area? Maybe they'd be able to find out how IDOT made that determination that as soon as they put it in, let's take it out. I mean, what was the reason behind that?
Derek or just Civil Tech, do you have any? I am very familiar with the area he's talking about. I actually thought it had something. I don't know if it was planned or permitted properly, but I thought it was a strange place for it because you have the traffic coming off 294 onto Ogden, and then
And that like it's so backed up when
Correct.
you're going west at Wolf Road.
Yeah. I understood why they might want it there, but I thought it was a very strange location. As you're coming, north on 294, exit on Ogden East, then you're coming to this flashing sign right away, and people,
But I just remember that as being one of the examples on Ogden Avenue. I don't know if I can go back on this, but I thought another issue that maybe we want to look into as we look at the improvements on Ogden Avenue is the car wash at the corner of Eberly and Ogden. There's a lot of people who drive over the curb to exit the car wash right onto Ogden rather than taking the exit off of East Avenue or Eberly Avenue. And I don't know how we would be able to refrain from people doing that, whether it's wheel stops or having them put in some sort of planters to prevent the people from entering, because I've seen so many near misses there.
yeah, I know what you're talking about. And I'm trying to remember when originally that was approved, the car wash in general, it went through some planning and zoning process. There was, I know, discussion about entrance and access, and I don't know if that was something that was granted at the time, or if again, it's sort of a separate topic, but it relates to the safety issue. So maybe, we could have staff look at that. Is there some appropriate regulation that we might want to consider to prevent that from happening?
And I'm taking notes. What was that movement at the car wash, exiting?
Exiting out of the car wash, going eastbound onto Ogden, as opposed to, I think, the planned.
Sometimes they even go westbound.
They try and make they finish their car wash and they may make a left turn across all the lanes to go westbound. I think that's something we would definitely maybe want to consider prohibiting.
There's actually a curb there. There is no curb cut, so it's like they're just driving over the curb right onto Ogden.
Whether it's west or, obviously the left turn west is even more dangerous, but the right turn over the curb, because then you have traffic turning off of East Avenue onto Ogden, not unexpectedly encountering a car turning out of the car wash, that type of thing. But I think that's more of a village regulation with the car wash, but it's a good point that you bring up, so.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, appreciate it.
And I will add in, like right now, it kind of looks like that is almost a driveway. And with the pedestrian improvements and streetscaping, we are going to be bringing in some brick paver elements to the corridor and, kind of making it look like more like pedestrians should be there and cars shouldn't. So hopefully that should help as well.
That may help, but let's look at, because people, unfortunately, some people just, they build habits and they go for the convenience. It may be, I don't know that pedestrian pavers are going to prevent someone from driving over if they're already driving over a curb. So I'd like to consider what options we have. It's a good point that Steve brought up, so.
But I think those visual cues can be really helpful. This is a space that, my concern with if we get back to the pedestrian crossings, the unsignalized crossings, I was going to go back and say that my experience is more what Fire Chief and Ed have said, is that on 31st, I feel that it's very safe. I travel that a lot, and I think it's a very useful space for it, but part of that is that you've got a long view and not a lot of side streets coming in. Ogden is a lot more cluttered and there's a lot more traffic, and I'm not sure that this is an analogous, I'm not sure we can necessarily compare the two. I feel like Ogden, I am concerned for the safety of these unsignalized crossings on Ogden. I don't have a better solution, and I know that we need something, a way to get pedestrians across, but that's why I think even those visual cues that make it seem like, yes, pedestrians should be here, can make drivers slow down. They can make drivers pay more attention, but I still hesitate.
But similar with the other things that we've dealt with tonight, we might not even have the option of doing this, but is there at least an agreement that we approach IDOT about the possibility or feasibility of it? And then we may, if we go this far and get permission, and then the board says, no, we don't feel safe, we can still do that, obviously, right?
Yep.
But if we don't ask, we'll never know, and we could say, we tried and then make a, we may get permission for both, Oak and Raymond, then we may decide, one or the other goes and the other doesn't, so, but at least keep the option alive. I don't know, I don't mean to seem cynical, I could see some trouble IDOT approving something like this.
Yeah, but I think the key is slowing people down. It's the only thing. I know that, and I'm sure I know there's multiple ways to do that. I'm gonna throw something out at you a little bit, and everybody's probably gonna hate me for this, but at the Prairie intersection, what about, and I know it's much smaller, what about a rotary? I'm from East Coast. There's so many rotaries there, and it would be much smaller. It wouldn't be another 8 corners, but some way to slow, and it's a kind of that unique setup there. I mean, there's rotaries that are literally just, slightly raised pavement, and then there's the bigger ones which can slow people down more. I don't know if that would be a unique intersection for something like that.
I mean, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm not sure if the traffic operation would handle it.
Yeah.
Because it's an arterial route, I just figured,
Right-of-way need. You know, we've looked at, Tim, we had some discussions on our veteran circle, and when you look, you send me a couple, and I think we can take a quick look at it. I'm concerned for the restaurant on the northwest corner, and I'm concerned for the building on the southwest corner. But we could look at something like that, but they have a pretty large right-of-way need there.
Yeah, I'm thinking, I have an example I can send you to. There's a town that my sister lives in, Salem, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And they have a pretty big pass-through, which takes you from, and they're a huge tourism area if you're
Right.
familiar with Salem and witch trials and all that. But they're a huge pass-through to a beach community called Marblehead. And it's a very residential area. There's also a lot of businesses there. But they had this crazy intersection where cars would just fight through, and you literally, it was multiple streets coming together in kind of a funny configuration like that. And you really had to just sort of look and take your life in your hands and make, your left or your right or go straight. And they just put this really small rotary, and people fought it. A very small rotary. It's just like bricks, It has slowed down and changed everything there. People then they put yield signs in, right? So it just slowed them down enough to just see, oh, is anybody coming? And then so traffic continues to flow, but it is, and it's high volume, I'll tell you. It was just an interesting thing. I can send you.
I have a feeling, IDOT, if you're gonna install something like that, it would have to be designed as a modern roundabout.
Yeah.
And those take quite a bit of right-of-way, like Derek was saying, at the
Okay.
intersection
So it's
itself.
typically
Send it, and we'll
smaller.
look at it.
Yeah, we
though.
could
I don't mean
definitely-
to shoot it down,
Yeah.
but that's the initial concern.
Sure.
But traffic.
I guess to the crosswalks, just real quick, if you were going to prioritize one over the other, I feel like the Raymond one that's heading towards the school is the one that has more people. And if IDOT might think 2 sounds crazy, I would vie more towards the other one, in my opinion.
that's an interesting point. I don't know if they look at it that way, well, we might give you 1 out of 2, and, I mean, I can maybe try and get board consensus on it, but I guess in general, for now, if they're not, one gets approved, the other doesn't, are we okay, just so we get a consensus with at least looking into the possibility of the island crossing at Oak, and then we'll talk about Raymond next? Does the board agree with at least applying or
Yes.
seeing if there's an option?
Yes.
I'd
Can I-
like to ask to President Garvey.
Sure.
I point out the right-of-way, let's just talk about Oak right now.
Sure.
The right-of-way impacts looked okay. The 7-foot sidewalk, that's what's giving me a
That-
concern.
sure.
And I'll explain it as, the 7-foot sidewalks are all the pedestrians that walk up east and west on that area. They're gonna have that narrower parkway, right? To me, right now, it seems like the cars are
Right on top of you.
and it's 3 feet, still 7 foot wide, but it's gonna be, I just wanna point out, there's a very low crossing count now. I understand we're trying to make it more pedestrian friendly, maybe with the refuge island, you would have additional pedestrians, but I think that's what the board should be considering. I know we've talked about 31st Street in Westchester. That's a bike path that has way larger volume and I think certainly warrants a refuge island. The low volume makes me question whether this location also does. It, really, the reason we're picking this intersection is just because it's.
It's in the middle.
Distance between traffic signals.
Yeah, I don't feel strongly about Oak. I feel more strongly about the next one.
Right.
But
Is there,
Just,
Sure,
I
and
don't
I
really
just-
necessarily have an opinion one way or another, but that's what I am weighing as I'm thinking about this is, and the solution is, we can put the refuge island and put the 10-foot sidewalk in, have a 3-foot more right-of-way impact on the south.
Right.
And we can evaluate that.
And it's tough to judge the, potential counts, because right now, I know very few people are going to try and cross Ogden at Oak right now, but if it was available, I mean, and I'm trying to think, you can't necessarily tailor it towards the businesses that are there or in the area, but, I was just thinking of anything, it's, that kind of, if there's children or anyone crossing to go to Ellard Park, you can go straight down Oak and then you dead end into Ellard Park if you got people crossing, just as a way to get, so you don't have to go to Maple or Prairie to get to, Ellard Park. There might be other reasons for that crossing, but I still think the same analysis, let's at least consider it unless, there's some harm in considering and applying for it, and then we may come back and say, okay, we don't want to do it unless we can get the 10-foot right away. We don't want to do it. We prefer, if we only get the choice of 1 out of 2, we might weigh heavily towards Raymond versus Oak, that type of thing.
is there any feedback from the public sessions on where pedestrian crossings should be? Or is it just simply this was halfway between?
No, we recommended looking at, or we suggested looking at Oak Avenue for the halfway between the two signals.
Okay.
And there wasn't too much feedback on that location.
Okay. I had another question. In terms of the refuge crossings, I think one of the tricky things is there is so much traffic and it's hard to time it right to make sure there's no one coming from each direction. Is it part of this to look at the length of service between the lights at Ellard East and Du Bois and Maple to make sure that the lights are coordinated so that they're.
Yes.
Maybe it's already like that, I don't know.
Yeah, I believe the signals are already in a system.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. But I would definitely support refuge islands on Raymond Avenue. I know we have a lot of kids coming to Congress Park from across Ogden Avenue, so.
Okay, so why don't we talk about Raymond now, if
Okay.
that's,
Raymond, okay. Yeah, and with our designs on both Raymond and Oak, we're gonna be looking at the impacts. The crossing could be on one side or the other, or both. So it's something we can also evaluate as we start getting into more of the detailed analysis of the impacts. But this, at Raymond, there is an existing crossing. It is painted out there. And it is signed for the school crossing, I believe. So that is the main difference between Raymond and Oak. And, some things that we kind of discussed with the left turn lane, because we'd be potentially widening Ogden Avenue, we'd have to look at the parking spaces as well and see if that's going to have any impacts with the setback or seek another design variance at those.
did this come up at all? More discussion on this versus Oak in terms of the Raymond crossing, or it generate any additional public comment?
There wasn't a whole lot of public comment in general for one versus the other. There was a handful in support of it. Others were referencing other locations that have similar crossings that they didn't like. And, it was kind of a mixed bag of comments that we got.
what impact on the right-of-way would this intersection have? Would it bring the sidewalk back to 7 feet also here?
I think for the most part it'd be 10. I think there's one building on the east side. Oops. This building, it might be a little bit narrower. And then same with the west side. The other factor with this one is on the northwest corner. This parcel does have parking within their, right at their storefront. So they use the entire stretch of Ogden to pull in and park in front of their building. So widening that could have some trickle-down effect on their parking.
And we anticipate eliminate, like, that wouldn't be allowed parking to, once Ogden's improved, that's one of the items we're trying to address here.
It's
is-
parking on the side, yeah.
Right, is parking on the sidewalk, or even using this as like your sidewalk as your backup aisle. And at some point, there'll be further study, but I anticipate we're gonna have to look at possibly getting some lots and having village parking, because we can't just take their parking away from them, but that's certainly not the type of parking we wanna allow once Ogden's improved.
You know, historically, I mean, the crossing there, I mean, it's a de facto crossing route to get people to Congress Park School from that area and other things. And I know over the years, I've had some of the crossing guards in that area basically ask for combat pay, you know, trying to, and it's a difficult thing, you know, we want to, you know, say, well, it's just too dangerous, you know, go another route, but you got to go to Maple, or you got to go all the way to, you know, the next light just to, you know, to cross. So it is, again, Trustee Kaluzny's point, where I think this would be more impactful for a specific group, but it's the group that would be most impactful is, you know, children crossing, so we got to, you know, try and make it as safe as possible. And I don't know if that weighs more heavily with IDOT in terms of possibly granting some type of relief or protection here, but it would have to be taken into account that the most likely users of this would be, you know, school children, so.
Jim, did we have higher pedestrian counts here, just given the fact that it is a school crosswalk, or not really?
The day we took our counts, we did not have a very high count.
I don't know, and with the situation with the police department now, I mean, do we have crossing guard there still?
No.
I don't want to put
No,
anybody
we
on the
don't.
spot, but. Okay,
I don't think we did this past year, school year.
okay, yeah,
And I don't think, the families I know who live on the north side of Ogden, they did not, their kids generally, I do not believe, or they either walked to Maple or they didn't walk to school. I think they were trying to get buses for them,
okay.
but
Well, that
But-
could, you know, weigh in, you know, in the decision, so, but, I mean, it's a similar, I guess it's a similar question for the board. Is this something that we want to attempt to design and apply for as a possibility and see what IDOT says, and then make a decision going forward after that? Is that sufficient enough direction that, you know, yes, we're definitely interested, we're concerned about safety, concerned about logistics, interested in looking at the design, and obviously dependent on what IDOT says.
Yeah, and I will say that IDOT generally is, they're more okay with improving an existing crossing than they are to introducing a
Creating
new
new.
crossing.
Yeah.
So there's a good chance that they'll be in favor of improving Raymond.
Okay,
great.
all right,
I believe that's all that I have.
okay.
General question for you, and maybe this is something we'll talk about going forward, but we talked about the parking that you had seen over right off Raymond there. What about some of the areas, if you look at the Oak pedestrian crossing just west of that, so you're gonna be at like, what would that be, Elm-ish? Where, like, for Enterprise and the body shop and all that, I mean, that's 100% you pulling off Ogden and park in front of the building. Is there any intent to do anything with those kind of areas?
That is something that we are still going to be discussing about, like how to approach those properties. Because I know some of those business owners were at the public meeting, and they were very adamant that they did not want to lose the parking in front of their building.
So what's the next step look like for you and then for the board? When will we hear back, or what will we hear back, or when we will need to provide additional input?
So over the next month or two, we're going to be scheduling coordination meetings with the outside agencies, IDOT, Cook County, LaGrange, just to kind of get their support and to identify, you know, just to get all the project started, basically from the processing standpoint. And then I think design, we'll start working on our design and, you know, really detailing the impacts. And I don't know when we'd come next.
No, but I'd anticipate in the next 2-3 months, we'll have our meetings with IDOT and then come back to the board and report on what input we've received from them, and also, as he mentioned, LaGrange, Lyons, and Cook County for Everly.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for all your work to this point. Thank you to staff for their cooperation. Thank you to all the residents that participated in the public comment portion and the business owners. And the comments here tonight. I mean, each of us kind of have a different perspective and use of that area, so it's all helpful, so thank you.
We appreciate it, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes. If you can come up to the microphone, and I saw you frantically run out to try and verify something.
I talked to Detective Jelinek, who runs our crossing guards. He said we have not had a crossing guard at Raymond and Ogden for about the last 5 years.
Okay.
So I fear that may be something you need to be aware of.
Yeah, I kind of thought this case, because I remember the former crossing guard was one of the people that talked about combat pay, because it was it's a challenging job, but I appreciate you checking on that,
No problem,
so,
sir.
thanks. Okay, the last item we have up for discussion on the committee is the recommendation from Chief Adams about a change in the rank at the fire department. Again, we have a memo, but Chief, if you'd like to summarize your recommendation and the reason for it, please?
Yeah, I pretty much hit all the highlights. Thanks for taking time and listening to this recommendation. This is current rank structure of the fire department. This does not add any new positions, anything like that. Currently, the way our rank structure is set up, I'm in charge, obviously. And then there's a captain on each of the 3 shifts, a lieutenant below them, and then 6 firefighter paramedics stationed at the 2 fire stations. Station 1 typically will have the captain and up to 3 firefighters there. And then Station 2, lieutenant with 3 firefighters there potentially, firefighter paramedics that is. So basically, in a nutshell, as part of officer development, encourage the officers to continue developing their leadership and their management skills. Captains currently are recognized in the fire services upper level supervisory position, whereas a battalion chief is considered a first basically low level. Doesn't sounds bad, but low level chief, basically your first level of chief. And currently, our captains hold a lot of the responsibilities that battalion chiefs currently have. Their leadership qualities are along those lines. When it comes to a MABUS level, which is, MABUS stands for Mutual Aid Box Alarm System. It's actually unique to Illinois, and the rest of the country tries to model, is getting to the point where they're modeling themselves after this, the way the system is set up. Our MABUS, we're in MABUS Division 10, which makes up about 17 towns in our general region. There's 70-some MABUS divisions in the state, throughout the state. Anyway, on a MABUS level, it's it's preferred that you have a chief in the management of larger incidents. So currently, our captains are able to manage their, we call them companies, they're groups of guys, or groups of firefighters, I should say. Whereas they can go on MABUS as a battalion chief and command multiple companies at that point. When it comes to FEMA classes, leadership and management classes, it's harder for a captain, the captain rank, to be allowed to take some of those classes, which would definitely improve their professionalism, their leadership skills, and their management. The other thing it does is encourage the younger members. It's, again, a little more not recognizable is a bad word. Guys strive to be chief. Another thing that this does is kind of open it up, not that I want guys to leave, but it actually opens it up for the opportunity to become a deputy chief or an assistant chief at other departments when they retire or whenever they get to that point of their career. So just overall, it increases the professionalism, just definitely reflects their leadership and their management they currently have, and I think our captains are well deserving of it.
It seems like it's kind of the industry standard, and we're just trying to change the
Yeah,
labels, because that's
yes.
what they're doing anyway, and it seems to make sense. And the idea
Yes.
of, encouraging the leadership skills and, making the other opportunities available might make them stay here longer also, so.
Yeah,
so-
yes.
Okay, but I appreciate you bringing this forward, the recommendation. There's no real financial impact, because it's not changing, adding positions or anything.
No.
Board have any questions or comments, the chief?
I have just a question. You may have answered this, but if you are going from managing a company to multiple companies in a, emergency situation, is there additional training that they would need to be?
Yeah, that's part of, the State Fire Marshal offers that additional
what you're
training.
talking about,
I know two of our captains had applied for the chief fire officer level. Currently, there's a company officer, advanced company officer, which are basically lieutenant and captain level classes, and then chief officer, which digs deeper into a lot of the HR, more organizational structure, management skills, and things like that. They had applied for it 2 years ago, two of our captains, and because the class had a lot of those chief officers, they were denied. So,
Gotcha.
again, that was kind of what spurred the idea originally in my head, like, darn, I wish we were ahead of this, and
Makes
I
sense.
wasn't, so.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, well, we'll put the ordinance up for the June 24th meeting, and again, I appreciate you bringing it forward, chief.
Thank you. Thanks for your
Thanks.
time.
Thank you.
Okay, that ends the items we have for discussion on the, Tim, are we going to need an executive session? Okay. So I will open it up one more time to public comment. Is there anyone on my right side? Is any public comment? Anybody on my left side? Okay, hearing no public comment, I would, at 8:12 PM, I'd entertain a motion to go into executive session pursuant to Section 2C11 of the Open Meetings Act to discuss pending litigation.
So moved.
Second.
The motion was made by trustee Cote, second by trustee Kaluzny. Roll call, please.
Trustee Ketchmark?
Aye.
Trustee Cote?
Aye.
Trustee Hendricks?
Aye.
Trustee Niramatsu?
Aye.
Trustee Cooley?
Aye.
Trustee Kaluzny?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, we're adjourned into executive session at 8:13. I do not anticipate any board action coming out of executive session tonight. We will have the executive session in the boardroom here, so I'd ask that anybody not participating in the executive session make a timely exit.